Okay. So, my name is Serene. I work here. I'm gonna do a quick introduction to Bootstrap, more specifically Bootstrap 3. Has anyone here ever used Bootstrap on a project? Show of hands. Okay. Does anyone here really know Bootstrap? Because if you do, you should probably be doing this because it's interesting and complicated. Well, it's simple for the most part, except for the grid. So we're going to spend more time talking about the grid, then I'll show you some other components. I did this presentation, then I realized that a lot of it is based on certain CSS concepts that are important to cover, but they're not in my presentation. So we're going to take a look at that real quick, and then we'll come back. So nearly everyone does CSS, right? To a certain extent, more or less. Now, how many of you have used CSS media queries? Okay, and a lot of what Bootstrap provides and pretty much responsive web design is based on CSS media queries. So what I'm showing is regular CSS selectors. You have the star, you have the ID selector, you have the class selector, and pretty much what it says is apply these styles to these elements within the page, which is all nice. But what if you wanted an image to show up on a very big screen, but you didn't want it to show up on a very small screen? Previously, what you would have done maybe would be to have a JavaScript listener on the window. So whenever you do a window.resize, you calculate and decide whether to show or hide an element. Now with CSS3, this idea of media queries came in. So instead of just having selectors for elements on the page, you can actually have a selector that describes what kind of screen you're looking at. So you can say, okay, I have a media selector for a screen that's vertical or horizontal or minimum height this or maximum height that. And what that gives you is all this power and flexibility to specify styles based on how the screen looks, what size it is. I think there's even media selectors for things like Braille and stuff, so it's pretty versatile. So this is an example of what a media query looks like. Media max width 600. So then you specify what happens to the element for max width 600. And you can actually combine them. So you can specify the min width and orientation. Then the styles only get applied within that condition. So it's having the power to specify all this conditionality within CSS, which is pretty powerful. And back to the presentation. So what is Bootstrap? It is a front-end framework originally developed at Twitter. It started as something small, but then a lot more people from inside Twitter started contributing to it. In 2011, it got open sourced. Right now, it's the most starred project on GitHub, which is impressive. Over 78,000 stars and over 30,000 folks. Bootstrap 2 was released in 2012, and the big thing it came with was support for responsive web design. And in 2013, Bootstrap 3 was released, and the main thing was mobile first. So the way design used to go was you either design a mobile site and then you design a full site and have them on separate domains. Then when responsive took over, you design your whole page for the full screen. Then you think about how would it look on mobile and start subtracting. What mobile first does is you actually start designing for the mobile. So you take into consideration how big you want your images to be, how large you want your assets to be, pretty much. So you try to go as light as possible and as minimal as possible, then expand up from there. So why is Bootstrap so popular? It's easy to use. It's responsive out of the box, so that's probably the reason why most of us don't have to write CSS media queries by hand, because Bootstrap gives it to us for free. Cross-browser compatibility, which is becoming less and less of an issue with standardization. I hear even IE might be going away and being replaced. Yeah. Popularity, and with popularity comes a lot more support. You can go on Stack Overflow. There's a Bootstrap tag, so you can get answers to a lot of these questions. More community. There's a lot of Bootstrap themes, so even if you have zero design skill, you can find really nice Bootstrap themes and make your sites and applications look very good without a lot of effort. And there's also plugins. So you don't have to use Bootstrap. I have some designer web developer friends who actually hate Bootstrap for a couple of reasons. Foundation is very big. I think it's probably the #1 competitor. There's also Cascade and Cardinal. I haven't used those. I've also used Blueprint.js, actually before Bootstrap came out, but it's more like its main focus is on the grid instead of everything that Bootstrap provides, including our components and JavaScript libraries. So what does Bootstrap provide? A lot of things. This is just a subset of what it provides. #1, there's the grid system. There's typography, tables, forms, buttons, responsive utils, and you can go down the list. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 in bold, and those are the things I'd like to show today. You can stop me at any point if you have questions. So the Bootstrap grid, it pretty much lets you organize your content on the page into columns. You can have up to 12 columns by default. If you really wanted to change that, you could go into the SAS or the less and mess with it, but most people don't have to. Some designers do. The columns are fluid/responsive, so you can define a column to have different behavior based on what the screen size is. And you could also use the SAS or the less to create gutters or padding between the columns. By default, there doesn't seem to be any, and that works for most people. So in order to use the grid, you always need to have it wrapped inside a container class or container fluid. And the difference between these two is with container, you have a fixed width, and with container fluid, it's pretty much full width, so it adjusts depending on your screen size. These days, I think nearly everyone uses container fluid, but container has applications still. Then within that container, you need a row, and a row is basically a row. Any one of these lines is a row. So, and with a row, the only things you're allowed to have immediately as children to a row class are column classes. Now, these column classes, the format looks like this. You have col, you have size, and this size is confusing, at least to me, because if you see size LG, you think you're gonna get a big column, but it's actually referring to the size of the viewport or the size of the screen. So if you say col SM, that's saying, okay, the size is for small screens or larger. And the columns is saying how many columns it's going to take up within that row. The size matters because when you have a Bootstrap grid, depending on the screen size, it's either going to show you the horizontal row, or it's just going to stack everything vertically. So if you have size LG, which is the largest size, which is for big devices. If you have a screen that's anything less than 1200 pixels wide, it's going to stack everything up vertically. If you have size XS, which is extra small, it never stacks them up. So size SM for devices less than 768, it's going to stack them up. Anything bigger, you'll actually have your row. And it's a little confusing. We're going to look at some examples. And we also have the average size of each column based on a screen size right here. So 62 pixels, 81 pixels, 97 pixels. And the columns can be either from 1 to 12. And it's pretty much telling the grid how many columns you want, or what percentage of the row you want the column to take.
So can I ask you a question? So if you're actually doing something, you're creating a website where primarily it's going to be on browsers, on computers, but it may be on devices. Would you do it on that? Use XS for that, so that things would by default never be stacked?
Primarily on browsers?
Right.
I'd go with MD in that case.
MD, okay.
It's a nice middle ground.
Okay. You can also have multiple.
Yes, you can.
That's another way.
You can actually combine.
That's not padded. 4 columns wide.
Yep.
2 columns. Oh, okay. Okay.
Yep, and I actually have an example of combining it and how it looks. So we'll get to play with that. And this is slide number 7. I think I have examples for slide 7. So let's look at a basic Bootstrap now. You have the Bootstrap CSS. For the most part, that's all you need to get Bootstrap working. If you're using any of the JavaScript components, then you'll also need the Bootstrap JS, which imports everything, or you can specify individual plugins like Bootstrap Modal, Bootstrap Time Picker, etc. We have a container fluid here, and we have a row. And in the first row, we have 3 columns, but we're specifying the column width for each to be 4, and we're using SM. So on a screen that's small or larger, we will always see the whole row, and it's not going to get stacked. And on line 31 here, we're also still using call SM, but we have different ratios. So we have 4 to 8. If we want to see how this looks, so up top here we have 3 equal columns, each one called SM4, and we have two unequal ones here, one taking up 4 and the other one taking up 8. Now we can play with this a little and see how it'll show up on different sizes. So since it's called SM, you have to go pretty small for it to start stacking. Somewhere around what's happening here.
You might need to reload.
Okay, maybe I actually have to manually select device. So if I select like iPhone 4, that's a little too small.
Refresh
It actually okay. I'm gonna do it without the Chrome tools. I'm just gonna resize Chrome the old-fashioned way. Need to move this. Okay, so if we make Chrome smaller, at this point it starts getting stacked because it's called SM4. But anything bigger, and we actually get the whole row.
happens if your columns don't add up to 12?
If they don't add up to 12, then you just get trailing space, I believe. But don't take my word for it. Let's try it out. It fills in? Okay. Call SM4, call SM4, call SM2. So we actually get the trailing.
And if it's greater than 12?
It pops up to the next line. So we can try that. So we can actually add another column. And that's just going to come here on the next line. But after the breakpoint, still going to stack. It's probably not best practice to ever go above 12. If you need spaces, there's actually offsets that you can use, and I have an example of those coming up. So I mentioned most of these previously. If you use extra small, the grid, you're always going to get it horizontal. It's never going to stack. Everything else will collapse at a certain breakpoint. And before the breakpoint, you'll get the horizontal row. And I have a big example to show. There's a lot of code, but it's basically showing all of them to get on one page. So if we look at slide 8. So when the screen is the largest, you have everything being horizontal, right? Whether it's called X. Should I make this bigger? Is that better? Okay, so call XS. We have 12 of them here. We have 8 and 4 here. We have 6 and 6 here. Everything's being horizontal. Same for SM, MD, and LG. Now, if we start resizing it, what's going to stack first? The lowest, right? Because it's for bigger screens. So somewhere around here, we call LG stacking, but everything else is stacking. And if we keep going, MD stacks. Now, I don't know about you all, but initially, when you see the numbers and the sizes, you'd think that call 6 SM might stack first before call 4 SM, but that's not how it happens. They all stack or unstack together, regardless of the number you have there. And so on and so forth. Call XS never stacks. It might start looking ugly, but it's always going to try to give you a row. Interesting thing is you can combine class sizes for more flexibility. Greg mentioned it, but had a question, so we can take a look at how that works. Slide 9. We can have call XS12 and call MD8.
we use this on our property website, like in a really large screen. 3 images on a row, but then when you start to shrink it, it would go to 2 on a row, and then eventually just all single like that. That's what you do with something. It does get a little confusing.
Yeah, it does. So here we want to support, say, mobile and desktop, right? So on on mobile, we want to stack the columns. It's a good example. I think yes. So at their largest, they're all full. But as we get smaller, and we're using call XS as an example, call MD. So even though this one on top was called MD8, since it's called XS12 and we're now getting in the XS range, we're still it's not stacking.
When you were the largest,
Oh wait.
XS12 was still in the same row as the next line.
I think that what it's doing.
Oh, because
here is-
8, 4, and 12.
Yeah,
Okay.
like
Yeah.
if it can fit them on one row using the least restrictive class, then it uses that. So in this case, it's using column mid 8 and column mid 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
As he collapses it, I'm just guessing, as he collapses it, and it can't, it starts to want to stack the medium columns, it switches to using the XS column.
Yep. Yeah, one explanation I saw online is it always tries to use the biggest one available for that screen size. So if you have only one specified, then that's more straightforward. But if you have two specified and you're within a certain range, it's going to try to use the biggest one. And if that doesn't work, it'll use the next biggest one.
So the priority goes to the pixel size of the screen according to class.
Yes.
So whenever you're in that range of pixels, that's the priority it goes to. So if you're in the medium, which is greater than or equal to 9, 6, or whatever it is, then I'll use it. But if you're outside of that range, then I'll go with whichever.
Yeah, because when you're at medium, it's all the other ones are also covered, right? Because those won't stack anyway.
Right.
So yeah.
There's a case where if you add up the XS's, like the MDs add up to 12, but the XS's add up to 18.
They do.
12. 6.
6.
So that's not. Is that right?
So it means that I think when we're at the smallest, we're gonna get 2 rows in.
Can you
So
change
it's
that
at
first
8.4
one?
right now, it's not even reading that.
Right,
well.
can you change the first one to be call XS6?
Yeah.
And then I think that would make more sense, because what would happen is, as you squeeze it, when it gets to a certain point, they would each take 50%. Right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right now, it's just gonna take its collapse.
But I guess if that's what you wanted, then you wouldn't need the second call MD, right? Because it would take 50%.
Well, no, because right now what you're saying is, if I have a large enough screen, I want the first column to take up 2/3, and the second column to take up
Oh,
1/3.
okay.
But if I get a small enough screen, just give each one 50%.
Yeah.
I'm
Sure.
just trying to come up with when you would do this. And that makes sense to me, but
So call XS6.
yeah, I don't know.
So if we get real small, it's gonna be 50-50.
Yeah. That'll be like your page.
Rule number 1.
Oh, yeah, you didn't. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So that makes sense. I mean, I'm trying to figure it out myself. That makes sense to me where you want different configurations based on.
Sides, right? Yep.
Still add up to 12. Yeah.
But if we left it at 12, then
Goes to another row.
it would go to another row at a certain point.
But it gives the first column the entire row because
Yeah.
you figure that's an important column of lots of stuff.
Right.
It gives because it's a XS12, right?
And I guess that's how you do it.
Yeah.
And I have another example of it. This time we're combining 3 different sizes. So XS12, SM6, MD8, MD4. So what are we expecting to happen here when we start resizing it?
You don't have a small second column in the first row. It just disappears.
So it'll be blank space to the right.
Which row are we talking?
Well, once you get to the SM6, then it'll kick down the other column.
No, I figured because it's 6, and once you get small enough, it'll take up 6 columns, and the excess 6 will then take over and keep on the same row.
Oh, yeah, that's true too, yeah.
Because we have 12 and 6, right? In the first.
No, because could it use call SM6 along with call XS6? Can it a combination like that? Or once it gets small enough and it's too small for the right hand column, second column to use MD4 and it has to drop down to XS6, does that force the first column to use its XS style or can it use its SM style?
I'm not sure. I think it would use XS by default, but let's see. So we're still good. And nothing yet.
Yeah. So that tells me it's using call SM6 on the left.
Yeah, because
call SM6 there and call XS6 there. Yeah. 2 different sizes. And
it's you. I think this is implicit called SM6 too.
Isn't that so small? Keep going.
Yeah. If we get
if you keep going, then it's going to use both the excess ones. And it's going to drop the one down.
Yeah.
But can you do one thing for me? Can you go back to your code? Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. I guess it's the same kind of thing. It uses the one that's got the biggest screen, so it can. It doesn't have to drop all the way down to XS and use everything XS. Right. It's kind of so it's smart in that way. It's interesting.
Yep, I did read that it defaults to XS in certain cases, and guess that would be one of them. You can also offset stuff. So if you wanted spaces in between the columns, you could do that. So number 10 here, we have call MD4, so expecting it to take 4 columns. Then we have call MD4, but we're offsetting it by 4. And
since you're not adding to 12, you just have on the blank right side.
The offset helps you add to 12, right?
Oh, I'm sorry, it's on the same row. You're right.
Yeah.
So,
This is the way it's putting it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
There you go.
Is that used very much, or would you just?
I can stop so sometimes.
Yeah. Or would you do a quick red set?
It's almost like it's
Well, if you want the grid, I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's the whole idea.
Oh, I see. If you put empty divs in too, as soon as you go down, you can't.
Yeah, then you'll actually have a space
in
in the stack. Yep.
So it does offset to the left, but if you wanted, there are cases where you want an offset to the right,
So
you would just leave it.
you wanted the offset where?
Right? Like, so you just wouldn't, you would only have, if you want to offset it 3 columns to the right, then you would only make 9 columns. You know what I mean?
and it would leave it empty, right?
Okay.
So
it doesn't stretch it.
no. So you're talking about if you wanted the space on the right, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we tried it by reducing one of the columns. So if we made this call MD3, we should have
One.
some extra
Yeah,
space.
yeah.
Yeah. Let's just do that, see what happens. Call MD3. Yeah. All right. Other fun stuff you can do with the grid. You can pull or push columns. Let's see how that works.
Like floating.
So we have our first call MD9, and we have our second, which is call MD3. But we're pushing the first one 3, and we're pulling the first one by 9.
So if you can. So I've actually done this too on the website where we had on the desktop version, we had the map at the top and the details at the bottom. When you're on mobile, just having a map on your whole screen. So we actually just flip columns like that. So then your detail grid is at the top and then the map is at the bottom. Here's an example.
Yep.
Huh, good.
And I think it also affects the stacking order, right?
What if you pulled or pushed, but you didn't put the opposite of the other one?
Good.
Like here, you kind of went, what if you just went with one?
I would guess that they'd overlap. Let's see. If we didn't push this one,
Sure.
overlap.
Oh, no.
And that might be a valid use case for some designer if they're doing some fancy text. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, is that the only way to get them to overlap?
The columns?
Yeah.
I believe so. Yeah. All right, and whew, we're done with the grid. Bootstrap provides a lot of things. The grid is the most confusing. Everything else is pretty straightforward. I picked a couple of other ones that we could try out. So first is the table. And if you wanted to tell Bootstrap that it's a table, you just add the class table. And it looks like this. Pretty simple. Nothing fancy about it yet. Now, if we wanted the table stripes, back in the day, you'd use PHP, have one row call even, the other one row call, or go into the CSS and make sure they have different styles. You can also do it with jQuery, but we can just modify our class and add table striped.
I think you can do it with CSS3 now too.
You just say table striped.
Well, you can do the odd chop.
Odd and even.
Even chop.
Yeah. And they might actually be using CSS3 for it.
Yeah.
And can you guys see the strapping? All right. What else can we do? You can add border. So you just add a table border class. And we get our borders right here. You can add the hover state, which is also nice. What was the table hover? And now you get a hover state. You're going through. You can add a success warning, info, and danger to individual rows or columns to get the coloring. So if you've used Bootstrap, you've probably seen these all over the place, and they usually default to some color, like success is green. You can use them on buttons, you can use them on alerts, you can use them on text backgrounds. They're pretty common. So if we added success to one of our rows, and we can add alert to one of the columns. Okay, we got this success. What's alert on the list? Danger. Confusing.
In Ruby.
Yeah, in Ruby I just made aliases. And there we go. It's pretty easy. If you want the table to be horizontally scrollable on smaller devices, you can wrap it inside the table responsive class. So right now, you make it super small. The page scrolls, but the table isn't scrolling. If we wrap it inside table responsive, I'm used to Ruby, man. You can just type .table responsive, hit tab, and it'll automatically expand it for you. Pretty awesome. Anyone know why responsive doesn't have a D in it? Because respond has a D, right? All right. So theory should be scrollable now. So it's not squishing it. So tables are cool. There's these other responsive utility classes, which are pretty helpful if you want stuff to be shown or hidden based on the viewport size. So I have an example here. We have two images. One we have hidden if the viewport is extra small, and the other one is only visible if the viewport is large. One of them is the Solution Street logo. The other one is the greatest dunker to ever play in the NBA. There you go. So.
Then why don't you put it on a large screen? Go away when it's small.
I know, right? You still there?
You know it now?
Yeah.
So if you go sign one big contract, what's wrong?
So we had visible on large only for the Solution Street logo and hidden only for extra small. So if we start resizing, as soon as we cross the large threshold, the logo disappears. But for VC to disappear, you have to keep on going.
Okay, yeah.
So they're useful, and there's all kinds of stuff you can do with it. It can get tricky. You can combine them.
So I'm just trying to figure out if you wanted to hide something on small or below, or medium or below. I guess you would say visible, medium, or visible, but then if you said visible, medium,
And it would
then
be
it
hidden.
wouldn't show for large. Like, how would you do that? How would you say, I want this to be visible on medium and large?
You
And that's
put them
it.
both.
Both.
So,
Yeah, because on the table there's no visible on medium. Medium and large.
It's just counterintuitive to me. Like, I would think
Yeah.
that it would work either
Yeah.
visible this or higher or hidden this or low. Like threshold. Yeah. Sure. if it's hidden and small, why would I want to then show it again? And that would be very strange if you just showed us scroll, moving it smaller, it disappears, move it a little smaller, and it reappears.
Yeah, maybe for mobile designs that are like very drastic from each other, like like Greg said, you're rearranging things and on different viewports.
What's the star indicator?
The star is actually a block inline or something else.
Oh, okay. The display types.
Yes. So I didn't have an example of that one. And the other cool thing is Bootstrap glyph icons. They have over 250. They're fonts. So if anyone remembers the days of trying to find icons and trying to find the 32 by 32 image or the 16 by 16, you had to deal with copyright, you had to deal with scaling. It was a pain. Now font icons are pretty popular. You can use Bootstrap, or personally I prefer Font Awesome, which is a good alternative, and it's also free. So they're pretty easy to use. I'll show you the source code first. Here we have a button, and inside it we want a glyph icon aligned left. Actually, it's not that. It's actually called glyph icon align left. So it's, if you've been inside the text editor, the align left icon. And this is it. And we have another one, which is a star. If we look at our presentation, there's a lot of them. These are just some examples. So if we wanted to use glyph icon user instead in one of these, and it changed it to a user.
What are those already?
I think they have accessibility devices, so it's recommended to put them in because you don't know what device accessing your site, like a text reader. And I believe that's it. Anyone have any questions? No. All right. Thank you.